Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Hail and well met, people of the internet. It's time for the Pantheon Plus Rewind, our weekly podcast covering Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the upcoming MMORPG by Visionary Realms, and everything and everyone surrounding it. This week, we get to gush about Pantheon lore with the community, try to talk about Pantheon in a new way, catch up on our community spotlights, and finally, let Theric tell us some tales from the fire. It might be a lull week, but it's never a dull week with me, Desrin, and my consistent co-host, Theric. Join us as we always have something to talk about in this week's Rewind. So, Theric, it's a pretty interesting week, just because it's not interesting at all, because it's a gap week, for sure. But I feel like there's a certain buzz in the air because of that July schedule. Are you feeling that, or are you just like, too busy relaxing?
A little bit of both. I'm very busy relaxing, which is a nice thing to say. But I feel the buzz in the air. I know what you're talking about. I think it's because the dev stream is the second week of the month rather than the first week. So we're kind of we're waiting a little extra time for that dev stream, and with the DRT at the end of the month being open to everybody, I think that's created some intrigue. So I feel that, and I think it's going to sort of ramp up as the month goes on, which is cool.
A little like calm before the storm, maybe.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like.
A little bit of the thunder clouds are forming, but hopefully in a good way, not in a bad way.
Yeah. No, this is the good thunder clouds.
Good thunder clouds. That's right. Exactly.
But that's awesome.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm also busy, but not very relaxed. I really like that phrase, by the way. I'm busy relaxing. I like that. You should coin that.
Beautiful contrast there. I always want to be busy relaxing. That's the only kind of busy I want to be.
Dude, that's really good. Well, you know who else is busy this week? Our adventuring party.
Oh, right.
So let me get to that. We've got Ziplocks on the Darkmere Rogue, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, Wiki Woo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Horsosaurus on the Human Warrior, Fury Wrath on the Archive Summoner, and Pavejo on the Gnome Wizard. I think it was Pavejo.
Yeah, I was gonna guess on that one too. I wasn't sure. I would have said Pavejo. Yeah,
cool. It's my California side coming in there. I know how to pronounce a J.
Nice.
But yeah. So this week, check out the scrolling banner during the rest of the show for everyone who joined us via super chat last week. And as always, thank you so much for all of your support, and let us know if this works for y'all. We really do enjoy the adventuring party concept, and between the Patreon and the super chats, it lets us do all sorts of really cool stuff. So yeah, like the usual, feel free to join our Patreon if you aren't around for the YouTube premiere, or super chat if you are. But actually, speaking of letting us do some cool things,
yeah, it's that time again.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna hand out a Watcher's Pledge today on this show, because that supports both Pantheon's development and it lets us give back to everyone who supports the Rewind. So figured we'd do a giveaway. This actually came up sort of out of the blue last week during the show, and somebody suggested it, and we said, yeah, that sounds great. So yeah, we're gonna give away a Watcher's Pledge. So that's $50 value, and that gets you obviously a digital copy of the game, early name reservation, early character creation prior to launch, a game title, that being Pantheon Explorer, and supporter forum access. So if you're here for the premiere, just type in chat, just hit me with an @Theric and the YouTube play button emoji, and I'll throw your name in the hat for the draw. And we'll do that during the Lore You Know segment. If you want to pledge from us before, maybe just hold off on entering so everybody else can get a chance. But otherwise, everyone's eligible. And if you win, just send me a message. You can do that via Discord or via email. It's theric@pantheon.plus, and we'll get you hooked up. So yeah, good luck, everyone. This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, so let's do the news and notes, and not much in the way of news items this week, but just a reminder, like I said earlier, Thursday, July 14th is the next VR developer live stream. So we should have plenty of recap from that on next week's show. But when the going gets tough, the tough get loring, if you will, if I can be allowed to make up words, because that's what I do. VR took to social media this week to ask the following question of the Pantheon community. They wanted to know, what's your favorite part of Pantheon lore and why? So we're going to take a look at some of the responses, being from Twitter and Reddit and folks that shared their thoughts on this question. But I thought a good way to sort of prime us for some lore talk would be to read a couple of the lore notes that came in the June newsletter. And honestly, they kind of got lost in the shuffle because there was so much else to talk about. So, we do have some news after all, I guess. So again, this was from the section entitled The Pantheon Dungeon Experience. And they framed the question here. They said, we've heard and seen a number of Pantheon dungeons to date. These include Amber Fate, Halnir Cave, Black Rose Keep, The Gate, the Daedrum Ascent, just to name a few. If you were to give us one or two quick sentences about these dungeons and explain the experience to differentiate them from another, what would that be? So again, this is from Chris Perkins from Joppa answering these questions, and that's exactly what he did. He gave us a couple lines on those dungeons in particular. First up was Amber Fate, and the quote was, Amber Fate is the coldest place on Terminus, the coldest known place on Terminus. Highly vertical, both in height and depth, and harbors one of Terminus's most terrifying secrets. So just one line, but given a couple extremes there. And I do want to comment on the terrifying secret here too, because it's something that's intrigued me for quite a while. The lore talks about, one of the dwarven deities being imprisoned in Amber Fate.
Yeah.
His name is Razik, and basically he was like forcibly descended along with Khazis by the sort of there's like three main gods in the dwarven pantheon as far as we know. The triumvirate, right? And it's all about balance. So the sort of the one in the middle, Lockenhammer, said, if Khazis is going to descend, then Razik has to too. And then basically he was placed in a prison. And this is my interpretation of the lore, of course. But the lore talks about it being 1,000-year imprisonment, and that basically means like if the game is set in the year 987. We've got about 13 years to go until Razik is up for parole.
Oh.
so maybe that's the terrifying secret. How do you like that for a setup?
Oh, that is quite the astute observation there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the dwarf lore for sure. But that's pretty uncanny. I'm on board with that theory craft there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm definitely on board with that, and that's gonna be one of the first things I want to explore and sort of investigate when the time comes. Another one was from Halnir Cave, an old favorite of ours and something we've seen a lot of. This is the way they described it. Chris said, it's filled with dark, winding caverns and toxic fumes from crystal formations that natively grow there. Drawn Ratkin and the Black Rose battle for territory in the upper levels of the cave, unaware of the ancient evil brooding in the deepest chambers. So again, more ancient evil. Can't get enough of ancient evil. Honestly, I don't even have a clue what they might be talking about here. I don't know what that evil might be. The only, thing that I could come up with or off the top of my head, at least without going too deep into the research, they talked about Halnir Cave back in 2018 in a newsletter and gave sort of a rundown of it. And in that, they said that it used to be basically like a goblin cave, and then the humans of Thronefast started moving in and sort of delving and basically drove them out. So maybe there's some sort of like, old goblin king down there or something like that. I don't know.
I mean, that'd be an interesting twist versus the Ratkin and other inhabitants that we've seen so far. But I don't know, maybe it's just the thing that drove out the goblins, Yeah.
Could be like the humans were passing through because basically like there's like from Avendir's Pass to the Roan Mountains, we know the humans traveled between those two locations, and doing so, it's assumed they went through Halnir Cave to do that. There's some reference to that in the lore, so maybe they just didn't go down far enough and something else drove the goblins out. I don't know.
Yeah,
cool stuff.
Always ancient evil, never current. I don't know why. We need more current evils, No.
Well, how about modern good? How about the exact
Modern
opposite of
good.
ancient evil?
Yeah.
Deep in the cave.
Not in
was
Throne
modern
Fast,
good.
that's for sure.
No, well, at least not according to Ben and I. He's definitely not.
Maybe I've been
that
reading
line.
too much Ben and I.
I think you have. The next one, I know you and I, certainly took notice of this one, Des, when it came out, because we actually talked about it a little bit, because it has a name that hasn't been revealed before. It's about Blackrose Keep. Chris said, the Keep Leon, known as Blackrose Keep, is home to the defected hero of Thronefast, Imani Karos, and his Blackrose forces. The Keep is built precariously among a system of high-standing rock and is said to be a tribute to Karos's love, the Lady Win Leon. So, like I said, Ben and I a second ago, we've both speculated on what led to the events of Imani Karos having to leave Thronefast and seeking out Blackrose Keep and basically making it his, home base, I guess. Now, Ben and I has gone way deeper on this than I have in the fan fiction that he's written. But it kind of dispels the notion, because there was an idea that Karos was involved with the queen. There was some sort of an affair going on between him and Queen Amenthiel. But the name Lady Win Leon is new. And it's kind of telling, actually, because in the lore, the Blackrose Keep was actually named Keep Leon at the very beginning, when it was in the ownership of a different sort of noble lord. And Jan actually referenced this in one of the more recent streams when he was giving that history of Avendir's past. He talked about the Keep Leon, and Wolfison Seville is the name of the guy who was there before, sort of a lord that was exploiting all the peasants in the area and trying to make it his own. Anyway, long story short, that's what we know. And now we have this name of this woman that Imani Karos was,
I think,
has dedicated this to.
When it all comes down to, all this kind of speculation and all these fragments of info that we have, I want to be really contrarian and say that maybe Imani Karos isn't the bad guy, and maybe they're just very misunderstood, and maybe he was manipulated by some spirit of the original owner or something like that, because the whole it was an affair with the queen thing, I never really wanted that to be a thing, just because there's such a trope.
Kind of cliche.
Yeah.
Kind of cliche.
And what we have is a lot more mysterious and a lot more interesting, for sure.
Yeah, it is interesting. And, we always assume, that the dude in the keep on the outskirts of the realm is sort of the bad guy, the exile, right? They sort of get labeled with that. But maybe you're right. Maybe what if in game you can sort of do things to align yourself with Blackrose Keep, and then Thronefast, there's a raid that goes in to take out the queen in Thronefast or something like that. Exciting, right? So again, it's all speculation, but it's fun. Next up was the Gate, which we've seen in Wild's End streams a few months back. And Joppa said, the Gate is an ancient, partially flooded temple network built within a sprawling cavern. Rumors of unimaginable treasures have lured countless explorers, but the presence of wraiths and reports of obstructed or water-filled passageways have kept the true secrets of the Gate hidden. So not too much to work with here, but the term temple network caught my eye, because it's what we've been talking about lately, right?
Yeah, yep.
Multi-tier connected dungeons. I mean, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And I like it. And then last but not least was the Dragon Temple, again, we've seen recently, known as Daedrum Ascent. And Joppa said, not much is known about this mysterious mountain peak, except the architecture and symbology used in these structures that have been built here have a resemblance to dragonkind. So again, not much more to go on here, but it reminds us that rainborn dragons, did once live on the planet, and for a long time, in fact, before any of the 9 races set foot on the planet. So honestly, every good RPG, every good MMO, I think, needs a dragon tucked into the world somewhere. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, yes, obviously we need dragons. This is a trope that can't really die, I guess.
Yes.
And I'm okay with it. Dragons are cool. If you don't think dragons are cool, I mean, improve your outlook.
What are you
man.
doing here? What are you doing? Get out.
Just kidding. But I think I want to throw out another really wild idea with pretty much no basis.
Oh, that's what we do here.
Yeah, why not, right?
That's the name of the game.
If we can talk about lore, I can throw out random bits, But so the Ascent it's actually let's say it's inhabited by dragon worshippers, which I think that is alluded to a bit. But I'm thinking the pinnacle of the whole thing might be that these this cult or this whatever worshiping group is trying to resurrect a long dead dragon. But again, I don't know which dragon it might be or if that's like even possible in the lore. But I mean, that sounds pretty par for the course to me.
I would agree with that. So there actually is a cult of dragon worshippers, at least referred to in the lore. The sect of Perith is the name of them, and there's like they believe that the dragons will return. The Rainborn dragons will come back.
Yeah.
So maybe this is their hangout, their clubhouse. I don't know.
And I'll have you guys all know that's listening right now, that's not in the notes. Derek literally just remembered that. So I couldn't remember the name for the life of me, but you just popped it right up. So that's why we follow you.
Well, that's what research will do to your brain. You just sort of get these things lodged in there, and you can't shake them out. Eventually, they just wait for them to fade away. But it hasn't happened yet. So yeah, I can say some of those things off the top of my head. But yeah, I think that's super cool. And I would love to get more information about this. I'd love there to be more in depth. I like when they go through these areas and sort of give us these little bits. We don't need much. We just need bits, but always up for more. But yeah, so that's fun. That's from the June newsletter, and go back and read the whole thing if you haven't already. Let's get back to the Twitter question that was asked, and that was, what part of the lore is your favorite and why? And so this was thrown out and got some responses from Twitter. We'll start there, and it's from Basgrim, as everybody knows, one of the content creators in the community and the source of many, many facts. And he starts by saying, the fact that the world of Terminus is made up of fragments of different worlds. It makes for some really unique landscapes and brilliantly leaves the door open to introduce new races and areas in future expansions as more collisions happen. And he actually gives kudos to an old somebody who was on the team, I believe, at one time, helped create the lore. And I don't recall their name offhand, but I agree with him 100%. I think that this concept of multiple worlds coming together in one place, you couldn't have a better setup for future expansions. And I've always kind of shied away from like the future expansions. Like, I don't think that talk is really like, relevant right now so much, but I can see the framework for it and why it's valuable, right?
Right. Because obviously we're all anticipating launch, right? But the idea that your world is already set up to naturally evolve, like, it's obviously set up to do. I think that is, you really couldn't ask for a better setup for an MMO to go long term.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Like, it makes me wonder, like, in other MMOs, and how did they sort of, structure expansions? Like, how did they do it? Because
we found a new island. Wow.
Yeah, we just happened to find some new place that we never discovered before. Or, some race was created in a laboratory, and like, where did the Ixar come from? Like, I know I'm going to, piss off a bunch of EverQuest people here because I should know that. But like, I feel like it's been underused, or I think like it's something that seems obvious. Anyway, the next one was from our friend Libwick, and they said they like the signature characters the most, for sure. So that's Belle Iris and Araka Mel, who we read the story of last 3 episodes, Thalen Greyborn, and Janice Sova. I know you agree with that.
100%. I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of the signature character stories. I think they're so good, and they do a great job of painting a picture of the world without being I almost said Silmarillion-ish.
Wow.
Well, they're still, individual stories. And so I feel like they actually don't spoil a lot other than put you in the world in someone else's shoes, for sure, but in the world, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. The next 4 responses, we're talking about the races, because people are really into the lore of the races. And I think this is really cool because I kind of like, when I think about the lore of Pantheon, there's no like single, like there's really no major unifying narrative. Every race has kind of got their own the storyline that is the lore sort of comes from. So read a few of these. Jeremy Hamilton on Twitter said halfling lore is a very unique take on our smaller brethren, which I agree with. And the Wingless on Reddit said, I'm not at a place where I can make a huge comment or pick through specific bits, but so far I do like the characterization of the halflings. Tree-dwelling lost children is a great take, and I'm also intrigued by the weirdness of the gnomes. And then our friend Lucille said gnomes. Did I mention gnomes? Because everybody loves the gnomes, except for Zergjerk.
Except for Zergjerk, yep.
And then lastly, some Locker Snap on Twitter said the Darkmer can breathe underwater. From that, I'm awaiting cool architecture making use of the vertical, like ceiling doors, high wall doors, and confusing 3D mazes. So basically taking, racial lore and using it to, make interesting gameplay out of it, which I think is definitely the case. We talked about underwater adventures last episode, and Drop has been keen to talk about that. So, and where the Darkmer starting city of Cyrenai's Rest, how that ends up looking is one of the sort of big mysteries, because we don't know if that's going to be underwater or it's above ground. It's kind of a question because there's been hints at both, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think the general gist of this little group and a lot of other responses, keep in mind, but is that people are actually somewhat tied to the races, which I haven't seen in a long time, honestly. Usually it's just like, oh, this race looks cool, I'm going to pick it. Or it has good passives, or whatever. But people already getting connected to the stories of the races is something I'm totally here for. And every single race has a really cool background and story. Even the bits that, relatively small amount that we know on certain races is like already above and beyond. And it is something to get connected to. I could pick literally any race in Terminus and be really, I don't want to say proud of being that, but like really connect with it. And
you can identify
with it. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree too. And I feel like that's a really strong suit of what they're trying to do with this game. In terms of classes, because class lore is actually something that I think is grossly underrated. I did a video series about like the lore of the classes, 4-part video series where I tried to give some information about each of the classes, because it's not really something you think about. But this is Ted Danson IRL on Twitter said, so Ted Danson, our friend from Cheers, said Paladin lore is super cool. I'm biased as a lifelong Pally though. And Paladin lore is super cool. That was one of the ones I actually found the easiest to make a video about, because it's pretty detailed about how they used to be clerics, but they were, I'm going to use vengeful just to piss off Nathan Napalm here, because he's a Pally, and but he's a good Pally. But yeah, they've got a real interesting story behind why they became paladins in the world of Terminus. So
it's very relatable, right? As we were just talking about, because it's one thing to believe a thing, and it's another to act on it. And I'm really interested in the Pally lore, because I think it's one of the more relatable stories to go from preaching to practicing and carrying out in spite of inaction. I think that is a big thing in the world today. So I think a lot of people could relate to paladins.
I agree too. I think that's an important point you bring up, where you have to make the lore like nobody wants, it's not real world, but there has to be touchstones of connection between, what the current sort of, I don't know, not mentality.
Well, it doesn't have to be
culture is.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a take on modern culture or anything, but having something that's relatable is something that it can be, very obscure, but meaningful. So it's not like Pantheon is giving some narrative about modern culture, but having something that we can connect to because of the world is, Anyway.
Yeah, totally. I agree, totally. The next one is about world building, and this is from the Lost Cause on Reddit. And they said, I really like the deicide war. It's a great way to tie the races together in a grand, hard-fought victory. It also certainly lays the groundwork for a return. My dream is a huge invasion event, taking over zones and outposts instead of just discovering new land to invade. And I really wanted to talk about this one for a second because, one of the weird things about Pantheon, when you really think about it, is when we all log in, and it's like I said earlier, the year is 987 IH. There's no existential threat facing, at least not that we know about.
It is interesting. Yeah.
Isn't that strange?
I know. I've thought about this a lot myself. It is very different than like anything.
Like anything. Like, think about it, right? New World. You had, this strange island and all these, invasions of this, demons and whatever. Like, every game has something going on like that. There's a demons invading, there's undead are coming to, alive. Like, something's crazy going on, and you need to, fix it, or you need to be involved in the solution to it. Pantheon's not doing that. There's just like this big canvas and landscape setup, and it's just like, with all this history, but then there's like, here we go, let's see where this goes.
It is so novel for an MMO to start in a post-conflict state,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I obviously, I think we will find our conflicts as we go, but I wonder how carefully they're actually protecting that, because it is something that's almost, I would say, conspicuously absent from what we know so far. And I'm sure there are things that we will tie to on launch day, but I mean, it is very, very cool that Pantheon is different in that way, that we're starting in the Frail Age. We've gone through survival, we've gone through war, we've gone through companionship, but then fragmentation. Right. And now the world, so much has happened that we can discover the past. But the present and future are so open-ended.
Wide open. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's perfectly well said. Yeah, I love that aspect of it. So, and then the last one comes from Bison ST on Reddit, and basically this was a pretty consistent comment that I saw a lot of, and I wanted to try and pick the best one. But they said, personally, I'm waiting to play the game to learn the lore. From the bits I get from some of the streams, it sounds like they've built the game's lore to match the mechanics they want in the game. So yeah, I mean, everybody out there who's waiting to not spoil it for themselves, I totally understand that, and that makes perfect sense. I probably would be doing that too if I wasn't doing what I am doing, because I like to go either all or nothing, right? Like, I don't like to sort of like go middle ground on it, because so I would probably be doing the same thing and sort of, holding a blindfold over my eyes to try and discover it naturally. However, I also would advocate that if you're having trouble being patient for the game and you're not enjoying the journey to get here, the development road, I think lore is a good way to sort of keep the clock moving past the time and get interested and a little bit more invested. So I've said that before, so I won't linger on that. But and there was another post on Reddit that I want to mention too. I don't have it in the notes, but it was really long, and it was really well written. I don't remember who said it, but basically just an overall explanation of why Pantheon's lore is different from every other MMO I've seen. And yeah, it's really good.
Oh, you should send that,
or a lot of detail,
or put it in so I can see it later, because I'm really curious now. Because now I'm totally lored up, man. And with, just to speak on this last comment from the thread. I've seen this a lot as well with the I'm gonna wait to get into the lore. I think the hesitation comes from a lot of games basically giving all the lore before you get in anyway. Which Pantheon, obviously, they're extremely careful about. And as I would say, I've gone into the lore deeper than probably the majority, right? But I'm not like you, not like Ben and I, not like even Crow and all of the writers that do Lore Plus. And I would say I thirst for more, but there's more mysteries that I'm finding as I read more. And that is, I think, the separation here, where I think you could dig fully into the lore and you're not going to spoil it. You're just going to have more that you're wanting. And like you said, it does drive your interest in the game for sure. But these devs they know their game is built on this lore, and they're very careful. This is a kind of different thing than other games that are coming out or have come out recently. And I would encourage people that think they're going to get spoiled if they dig into it to dip their toes in and maybe have a night where you go really crazy, because I think you'll find you're not spoiling anything. You're just learning that there are more mysteries. There are more things that you want to know. Well, anyway,
that's true. That's totally true. And the other thing is too, is that, to be honest, like there's already so much in terms of what you could read, that you don't want to feel overwhelmed when the game comes out either. So I know you want to discover it for yourself, but are you running the risk of feeling like, whoa, this is way too much? Like, is it going to turn you off of the game if you feel like that's, honestly, having never played a Dark Souls game before starting playing Elden Ring, I felt that a little bit. I was like, I don't think I can dive into this as much as I would, because I feel like there's just too much has happened already. So, just something to keep in mind, just another angle on it, I guess you might say.
Yeah.
So
I think of it as just like context, it's not spoilers, it's context. And while I am pretty confident that you could jump into Pantheon with knowing no background, and I'm just hoping that the writing team and the world itself will explain itself, without the extra bits. But I do think having the context is going to just make it even more exciting. So whichever way suits you, but I lean on the side of like dig in, because it's exciting.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so worth it. So yeah, totally. So that's the VR news that we're going to cover. Let's take a quick look at the Pantheon Plus calendar for the week of July 11th through to the July 17th. Of course, Monday night, Drac and his crew are back in EverQuest for Norath After Dark on our Twitch channel at pantheonplus.twitch.tv. Tuesday nights, we're back at it again for MMOs 101, playing some EverQuest. We were in Mistmore Castle last week, and we had a great time. I think we're going to stick around there. So yeah, come check us out. We're having a really good time. I think we're all level 25-ish at this point, 26, something like that. Thursday, we've got the dev stream, of course. That's Thursday at 9 o'clock Eastern on VR's Twitch channel. And of course, right after that follows Pantheon Plus U with myself, Drac, and the Nathan Napalm, talking about what we just saw, and then having folks come on air via our Discord. And so if you liked what you saw or you didn't like what you saw, you can come on and hang out on the show and talk to us about it live. So it's always fun. Friday is Redbeard Flynn is doing a video called The Favorite MMOs. And what he did for this was he sort of polled a bunch of content creators and asked for videos and explanations of what your favorite MMO is and why. And I hope I'm not spoiling anything, but you might see me in this video because I did submit a video for him.
You might.
So
oh
yeah,
my gosh! I think he just didn't ask me because I couldn't be contained with probably expecting a big Vanguard rant, So he's like, I'm not going to ask Ezra. Let's leave.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, he must be avoiding the Vanguard for some reason. I don't know, maybe
just messing with it, but like, yeah,
yeah. No, it should be pretty good, and I'm excited to see who else he got for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then Friday night, Sparrow's on her Twitch channel playing some P99, and that's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Saturday night, as always, Cringe Pony TV is back for another episode, and that's the calendar for the week. I also just want to quickly say that I discovered a really cool game called King Arthur: A Knight's Tale. Drac and I have been talking about it. We're big XCOM fans, and this is basically like a high fantasy XCOM. It's really good. I decided to make a video about it, a lore exploring video, which I put up on Friday morning, and just giving us some intro to the lore of that game and showing a few early missions that can give you a feel for the flavor of what that game's going for. So if you're into tactical turn-based games that are sort of lore heavy, it might be something you like. So check it out. But I'm going to leave it there because that is it for this week's news and notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right, community discussion. We're going to be hitting the official forums with a thread from Disposalist called Explaining MMORPG Concepts to Potential Players. So this one was a bit interesting, which, I mean, of course it was, so I pulled it. But I really wanted to highlight it kind of because it really got buried like pretty quick. Because there's surprisingly a good amount of activity on the forums right now, and a lot of threads that people are jumping into.
Nice.
But basically, Disposalist was trying to explain to someone who doesn't like grouping or social games, trying to explain some things that might make the experience of an MMORPG a bit more appealing. And for one, this is this is kind of funny to me as an introvert. But one of the first things that was said was, you don't have to be an extroverted chatterbox, right, to enjoy online games. Because, I mean, I could see a little bit of that stigma.
Well, it's a bit of a common misconception, maybe. I mean, I think when you say MMO, there's this mentality of like, sitting around a D&D table, or like, I don't know, at least maybe in my mind, maybe I'm thinking from the past, but there was sort of this idea that you had to really enjoy, constant conversation and kind of goofing around. And I mean, I don't know.
Right.
This is why I think this is a good discussion, because sort of there is a lot of maybe misconceptions around the MMO player.
For sure. And like you could imagine, massively multiplayer, and you see a video or two and there's hundreds of people running around and you're like, oh my, as an introvert, it's like, oh my God, I don't know about this.
All talking to each other? Yeah, like it, it can be deceiving, right?
Yeah. So Disposalist kind of seems to focus a lot on some mechanical benefits of online play though. Like the interactions between the characters, group synergies, class dependencies, meaningful crafting and trading, even if they're not direct interactions with players. Whereas obviously in like a single player game, usually it's very kind of like stale, I guess, with like crafting and trading, I would say, because it's like, it's just for you, right? And there's no, like you control everything. But
well, people are the ultimate gameplay variable, are they not?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's really what it boils down to, is like they're the ultimate X factor in any game.
And it can cause a lot of interest. But the big thing here is that Disposalist is thinking about like perhaps group play might actually need to be explained a bit more for folks that haven't played an MMORPG before, or maybe that they don't think they enjoy them for whatever reason. Like we kind of mentioned. And I actually really like that he also pointed this out. And that's that even old school folks might have some ideas about what certain, features mean because of their past experiences with similar features. But those might also need, or they might also be a little bit different for Pantheon and need to be explained, even if they're basic concepts of the game.
Totally.
I think it's just kind of generally it's all about that communication, and I think I agree with Disposalist when they say that the current website tends to explain things in a way that assumes a lot of MMORPG knowledge and background, especially of like classic MMOs, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's something that's easy to forget when you don't. It's easy to overlook the perspective of somebody who just is coming from a more recent information set. They look at the website and they see, a return to a classically spirited group adventure, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Is that like Destiny? And like, is it do I go in the lobby and or is it like League where I'm grouping up and that's like a 10-minute thing and then I never see that person again? Like, it's just, there's a lot of preconceptions that we take for granted sometimes.
100%. Yeah. And so Disposalist kind of suggests maybe they should give a little bit more clarity on what even basic things like grouping or soloing or raiding, the various social experiences, all the things that come along with like an open world, what all those might actually mean to someone that has played MMOs before, but also the people that haven't, or even people that have had experiences that led them to think they don't like it. You know,
Yeah.
because truth is, a lot of people haven't really played an MMO, believe it or not.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and those are all people that, they should be targeting. Like they should be seeking out these players who have never had this kind of experience before. I was actually having this exact conversation with my wife just yesterday about demographics and stuff like that for this game. And I'm
mhm.
like, when do you like, how do you get to the 19-year-old who, doesn't have any experience in this realm, like has never played, probably never played WoW, maybe never played, like even something from like the not early 2000s, but like the late 2000s,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's just they're, it's a good question.
It's really amazing how random people can kind of come into what seems to be very targeted games. I've
Hmm.
found this recently talking to a few people that are young, very young, and randomly got into what we might consider classic games,
Hmm.
especially with the whole like retro. Retro
Yeah.
games are actually a really popular thing, um,
Mhm.
especially with like the casual audience, but really just anyone. Could be people. Actually, I know a lot of people that like grew up in the country that randomly stumbled across the MMO genre, even
Hmm.
though it's just very different than what you might expect from a country boy or girl. Um, but yeah, there's totally people that either just aren't into MMORPGs, which is fine. But I
Yeah.
like that this is pointing out that, hey, not everyone has played a real MMORPG before, and there's a lot of people that'll probably like it if they
Yeah.
can quickly understand how it might appeal to them,
Hmm.
regardless of what their background might be, right? Like, like how do
Yeah.
you explain how do they explain this to someone that might just randomly stumble across the webpage, because that happens.
Yeah, no, it does happen. I think you need to, I mean, speak their language for one in terms of, and I don't mean that literally. I mean more like, this is where marketing and stuff comes in. And this is where somebody with a modern understanding of marketing comes in because, and that's not us. I mean, or it's not me. I don't want to speak for you, but that's not me. That's somebody who understands what appeals to people today. And, people are going to say this discussion leads to changing the game to suit those people. And that's not what we're
Oh, no,
talking about here.
no.
We're talking about the message being to what this game is to translate it into their language. So, what do people do? And I think, and this is going to sound like I'm sort of self-promoting or whatever, but I think showing a group based play in an MMO with everybody's face on screen, you acting as a team interdependently. I mean, that happens. There are team-based games out there, but they're not shown as team-based games. It's like one guy playing, Rainbow Six with their squad mates,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the streamer's face is on screen, but nobody else is on screen, or something similar to that. You need to show everybody on the screen, and I, I think that that's how you show it, and you can do it in different ways. It doesn't have to be just be us, old, whatever 40 somethings playing on Tuesday nights. Get a group of young folks and play, any game that's interesting to them, but show it in like a MMO style, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
That I've had this sort of like question bouncing around in my head too, and I think you need to speak the language, because if you don't, it'll just get ignored.
right.
You get written off as like a relic, or you sort of it'll just be like, this is a game meant for somebody else. It's
Yeah,
not meant for
if the
me.
first impression that you get, when you go to the website or YouTube or something, is that like this is so foreign, this is just immediately like this can't be for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, that's all really good points, man. I mean, and I unfortunately I don't really have a lot of responses to this thread, which I know that's community discussion. But I kind of just wanted to resurrect this so that maybe you guys can add to the thread, which of course I've got it all like linked in the show notes. But how about this? So I'm just going to pose this question just straight away. Like, Eric, how would you explain Pantheon differently to someone if they haven't played an MMO before, or like maybe haven't even played an RPG? Like, how do you explain Pantheon to that, random friend that you have that isn't really either a gamer or not an RPG gamer? Like, how do you relate that?
Yeah, it's a good question. How would I explain it to them? I think it would be akin to, I would say, okay, when I ask you to go out for dinner, or I say, let's go to the bar and get a drink, or let's go for coffee, what motivates you to do that? Why do you want to do that? If you do at all, like assuming, and you brought up the term introvert earlier, which I actually wanted to circle back on a little bit, because I think being an introvert is just a label that people put on themselves when they, when they haven't felt comfortable in a certain environment. I think everybody wants a little bit of social contact at different levels for sure. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. But the point being that, so I would say to somebody like, when I ask you to go out and do something, what motivates you? Well, because I want to talk to you. I want to, I want to share your company. I want to just be with you, and hang out and be together, because that's what we like to do. So what if I told you we could do that in a place that's way cooler than a coffee shop, way cooler than a bar, way cooler than, anywhere else? What if we could do it and we could, kill monsters? What if we could do it and we could, share, loot, and all these things. So you see where I'm going with this.
Mm-hmm.
What if you could control that social environment to make it exactly what you wanted, right? And assuming you're into, it's hard if somebody's never played an RPG, because this is the context of it. So it would have to be something they enjoy. But even if they didn't, you could frame it in more of the social context, where you say, what if you can create your character to be anything you want? This is the basics of, when everything went online and you could interact in these virtual environments, right? Like, that was the big attraction, was that it was completely self-crafted. And again, this is well-tread, ground for us, but for somebody who hasn't, maybe they've never done something like this before.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of frame it that way. And I think when you make it human, you connect it to our humanity, I guess, or our human instincts and tendencies. I think that's when you really get the buy-in, right?
Yeah.
You can convince somebody to maybe try something that they haven't tried before. So
yeah, that's really good. That's really good, man.
Yeah,
it reminds me a little bit of my friend back in the day, before I had played D&D before, and given I had played MMOs and all this stuff. But one of my favorite lines he used was interactive storytelling to describe D&D. And so when I think of trying to describe an MMO or an RPG, it comes a bit in line with that. And, I would say, hey, like, if you've read stories or watched movies or something, you kind of follow along with a, individual or a group of individuals and see the world through their eyes. And if this is a world that probably has a lot of like intricacy and drama, or, there's background that makes you really like the world, right? But you're forced to kind of follow through their perspective. And you can go to the movies with a friend, but both of you just kind of have to go along for the ride. Now,
right.
I relate MMOs to removing the protagonist and leaving the world. And instead of going to the movies with a friend to talk about what the antagonist does or the protagonist does, you go to the MMO world and you kind of control what you want to know about the world. You and your friend can cooperate to find things out about the world, or become your own protagonist,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the whole experience is kind of like, the rules are there. The world is vast and full of surprises, but instead of kind of just sitting and letting someone only give you the surprises that, the writers gave out, you get to seek those out however you want, with a friend, and make your own story. Obviously it's not going to be for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the basic relating I could do to someone that maybe doesn't play video games or doesn't understand why an MMO is specifically different. Because to me, it's not just a game with a lot of people. It is a world as the basis, which is, of course, why I am so into Pantheon, right? And maybe that's engaging.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way of putting it. And I just had a thought that I had an idea that we talked about it earlier. We said the game has to be linked to the modern culture, the modern way of thinking in some way. What if you told somebody, look, do you ever feel disconnected? Do you ever feel with modern technology, with social media, with our phones, with all the time we spend staring at scrolling through endless opinions and thoughts, do you ever feel disconnected from people? Do you feel like you don't talk to your friends or your family anymore? And if I'm trying to get them to understand what Pantheon's going to be about, I said, what if something offered you a respite from that? What if your gaming could be free of all that noise and it was just back to the basics of talking to people, right? I think people are looking for that these days. Honestly, like my read on sort of modern society is that I think people are feeling very, very isolated just by the nature of what social media is doing to our minds and our sort of relationships. I think that you could sort of explain an MMO to somebody who's never played one as being like, this is like the core of it. This filters out all the noise, all the advertising, all the political, all the opinions, all the cultural nonsense that's out there that you have a hard time filtering out, and just lets you talk to people one-on-one or talk to people in a real way in an environment you like, right?
Yeah.
Doing a thing you like. I just feel like it's like a pure form of that, can be hard to get these days.
I like that you said like respite, or because I think the alternative word that's used a lot is escape, which has a little like negative connotations, man, like go to your own reality,
it's a negative
right?
To escape,
but
like you're not facing reality if you're escaping, and it's like,
right.
No, we need oases.
Yes.
From the noise. We need oases from all the stuff. And that's okay. Like that's healthy. It's,
yes, rest is good.
Negative connotation.
Rest is good.
Yes.
Oh man. Well, this got a lot more wholesome than I think I was even expecting.
Man, we're a couple wholesome
folks. little bit. But yeah, I'd love to know everyone's thoughts here, and I again link the thread in case you want to contribute to that and give your ideas of like how would you go about explaining Pantheon in maybe a different way if you weren't talking to someone that just had played the last like 20 MMOs that have come out since 2000. I'd love to see it. I'll actually be keeping track of that.
I'd like
thread.
to see that too. Yeah, me too.
But
we should circle back and do this one again at some point.
Oh yeah, maybe. Oh, never mind. Maybe in the future. Yeah, we'll do it. But I think that's going to be it for this week's community discussion. The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, we've got a nice, chunky Community Spotlight this week, if I do say so. We've got a bunch of video content from folks that we don't always get to feature on here. So the first one, we got another one from Sir Medieval. And this one is called Introduction to Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, MMORPG Dungeon System. Dude, this is a great summary. I know you didn't watch it yet.
Yeah, have yet to get to this one. I think it just came out today as we're recording. So
yeah,
plan on watching it tonight, probably. I really liked his last one. We talked about it on the show.
Yep.
So,
and I definitely think this one was better than the last one. There were some improvements I think that we noted could be made. And this one was just really solid. And I really like this format where it's informational, right? He actually is reading parts of what was the Dungeon Experience newsletter portion, but he also adds his thoughts, maybe even like, hey, but I kind of would like to see this, and he separates it so it's not like, oh yeah, this is what we're going to see. So it's not like kind of theory crafting in under the guise of, oh, what could happen.
Right.
But just like, hey, this would be cool, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. He read the line of the Pantheon is a, oh my gosh, a lore, not lore based. I already forgot the line now.
Centric.
No, it was about the lore. I can't remember I should have put it in the notes, but it's basically like the Pantheon's, built on a foundation of lore, right? And and Sir Medieval did, like, if he can get into the lore of New World, which
he can get into the lore.
Oh man, right? Because it's like, okay, we're going from lore added on to game versus game added on to lore, and obviously as a lore nerd, I really hope that someday he dives into it a little bit, because I think it's really going to engage him.
Yeah, me too. Definitely. I'll leave a comment and encourage him.
Yeah, well, I definitely did.
Theric and Desrin say you must do this.
Yes, absolutely. If we poke him enough about it, maybe he'll like dip his toes in, and once he does that, maybe he'll find the Chris Kane and your collection, and it'll be over, man. It'll be over.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we've got a kind of new one. This is from TiersonBane. And this one's called Top Reasons to Keep an Eye on Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. And right out the gate, this is kind of a funny thing. I don't know how old Tierson is, but he kind of said, like, he thinks of WoW as the old school MMO, or like an old MMO, I should say. Which,
well, it's like we were talking about earlier, right? Different generations, different experiences. I think this is perfect example of that.
Totally.
I haven't watched this video yet, though. I have to watch this one too. It's not been one.
It's
had time to watch.
It's very positive, and interesting, because so he calls Pantheon a old school MMO inspired by EverQuest, which it's kind of true, but also like we know it's more than that. But I'm not going to knock him for that, right? But there are a few things here, and I feel like this is like the lore-themed episode, so I had to bring this up. He actually did say he tried to read into the lore. Maybe he got a little overwhelmed, though. But it's cool that he tried,
Yeah, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. No judgment at all. Like, even JN said that he felt the early lore he wrote was overwritten. He felt there was too much. I don't want to say jargon, but just overwritten is a good way of saying it. So, and I think he's tried to sort of adjust that a little bit, at least from what I can read in the more recent stuff. So
yeah, I think so. Yeah, maybe we should do something about that, Eric. But he does note that VR takes the lore very seriously and seems pretty excited about that pertaining to the perception system. Like a lot of us. Which I think he highlighted perception and acclamation as like the two big things he's excited about. But nice. Yeah, I think the thing that I appreciate about this video so much is that I think near the end he kind of recognizes that there are some parts of Pantheon that just like might not be for him. But he never goes to say that like, oh, they should change this. Like, this is a bad mechanic. He never says that. He never tries to make the game accommodate him, but he's like, hey, I'm really excited about these things. I don't know if these things are going to be for me, like he mentions, like corpse runs and stuff like that. But obviously he's willing to try it, and I don't know, very cool, even positive take.
It's a good takeaway, right? Not trying to bend the game to his will and just accepting it that it might not be something he's interested in.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Crazy. Who would have thought?
But then we've got to shout out to our guy, Mr. Nathan NAPALM, doing his putting this up on YouTube. I think this is definitely Cringe Pony, but it's just called "We Want to Play Pantheon Rise of the Fallen." It's the song, right? Or actually, it's kind of like two songs. But man, there's so many funny lines in that video.
Yeah, it's very good. Classic Nathan.
Classic Nathan. I put in the notes here to jokingly say he's spitting fire, just because that's what the kids say, and I want to relate to the younger audience. So
I can tell you this usually doesn't work out well. I've tried that; it doesn't work. cringe pony TV might be looking for you if you try that.
But there's a lot of great lines. It's entertaining for sure. But yeah, let's get into some kind of other bits that we don't get to touch on a lot here. And this is actually a Reddit post, it's posted on Reddit, but it is a infographic by Counter-Fleche. It's called the thread's titled "More Details: Class Race Matrix to Highlight Role in Starting Continent." This graphic is so cool because it takes the new race class matrix and it not only shows the race and class, but also groups it up by archetype and starting continent, and then kind of totals everything, including like the amount of like possible combinations.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually put it in the video reel, so everybody who's watching this on YouTube, you should be seeing it right now, and you can see what we're talking about. But what a great job by Counter-Fleche, who been around forever on the forums. I know you and I both have read his comments or her comments many times. But nice effort on this to sort of twist on the race class matrix update.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very informative and paints a nice picture of like what to expect on each continent. Maybe I don't know if there was a lot of like reason, like maybe there's some sort of purpose behind this graphic, because I know it's been talked about a little bit recently with like, oh man, this continent only has, these classes available or whatever.
Maybe.
So, but that's definitely the graphic to reference if you if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. Yep.
But then, okay, so let's do some articles. So I don't usually feature like game journalism articles on here, just because, I mean, with every piece of content, a lot of times there's a equivalent article that just kind of like says, hey, this content's out there. But there was some interesting bits here because with the recent DRT, the Dungeon Experience DRT, several different MMO journalism websites kind of, wrote up their little article and everything. And so let me list a few here. I think there are more, but these are kind of the three that I grabbed real quick. And one is Pantheon Rise of the Fallen dives deep into its dungeon system. This is by Marc Marasigan from MMOs.com, which is a newer website that I don't really follow much, I'll admit. But then there's MMORPG does recent Pantheon developer roundtable dives deep into dungeon design and what challenges players can expect. And that one's by Anthony Jones. And then the last one here, we've got Pantheon Rise of the Fallen plans about 15 dungeons for launch. This is by Justin Olivetti with massivelyop.com. And here's why we're popping this in here. Because originally that title was Pantheon Rise of the Fallen plans about 15 2-hour dungeons for launch. So
yeah, that doesn't work. That doesn't work.
so they for the record, they did change that title, like I said. And the editor responded to a comment left on the article kind of in response to someone saying, hey, like that's not really what they said. And I'll just quote their comment. It was, okay, I just listened to it and I understand the confusion. The answer was given in response to a specific question about whether dungeons were being designed around that session length, and they pretty much are.
Still not
right. Probably right.
Still not right.
Yeah. So I was really conflicted, and I was telling Theric this, about bringing this up. Because I really don't want to disparage gaming websites from covering Pantheon, right? But it is really interesting to compare these articles. Because so the Massively OP article basically gives one sentence to just list out, bullet points of the topics that they talked about in the DRT, and then gives a whole paragraph about 15 dungeons and 2-hour time frame. They even quote Joppa saying that they're serious about those 2 hours, right? Which again is like misconstrued. And as you might guess, the comments to that article have to do with what they spent all the time on, right? And a lot of the comments are like, "Oh yeah, the 2 hours is going to ruin the game," or "Oh, that doesn't sound like very many dungeons." Which, I mean, the 15, that was actually, that was said, right? But the correlation between the 2 hour dungeons thing was obviously misconstrued, and the comments respond in that fashion. Meanwhile, reading the MMO Bomb article, which is quite a bit longer, I don't even think it mentions the 2 hours. I don't even think it mentions the 15 dungeons. It just focuses on like what they said, right? The stuff about the dungeons. Yeah. And come to find out, they responded to like a Twitter comment about how like, that author and actually I think Anthony's an editor, but a couple people on their team are, really looking forward to Pantheon, and it wasn't a biased article, but it was just, I think it related to the content a lot better, right?
Yeah, I think the bottom line here is that, we have to appreciate that websites and game journalism websites, that the sort of the standard ones, they just might not have as much understanding of it as maybe if you're listening to this, or if you're following the development, you're in the community, and if you have that knowledge, you can clarify those things, and to do it in a way that enlightens people, not, I don't know, like not criticizing, not like saying you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, just more along the lines of, here's what they actually said, for your information. And leave it at that, because they will, even though the response was kind of like, still not sure you understand kind of thing, you can put it out there with facts. And like I said before, just fight bad information with good information, just correct it. And I think that these websites will come along over time if the game becomes, more, when you get to launch and becomes popular, or more in the conversation, I guess.
Right.
You'll get more accurate information, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think it is really obvious. Like, if you follow the coverage of Pantheon from various sources, you could tell which writers are like more invested, right? They kind of like know their stuff. And I'm sure, not every website is even going to really care about the game, right? It's just kind of, okay, I've got to put this out there. But the reason that I want to bring this up, and not asking people to go, telling off any sources or whatever, like that's not the intention, but it is important to do solid coverage, because folks following from a distance, like folks that maybe frequent these websites to just get caught up on the industry, right? What's coming up. This stuff really matters, because it makes certain impressions. And we know very well that a lot of people aren't going to read the newsletter. They're not going to listen to the DRT. And they're just going to read this quick summary and take the impression away. And dude, honestly, if anything, it's driving me to really want to kind of like clear the air even more about Pantheon, because I like it shouldn't be difficult to follow the game, obviously. And I think a majority of people that are following the game are doing it from a distance through other sources. And so I want to make sure that the right information is as accessible as possible, either through Pantheon Plus or whatever, but even so that these journalism websites can make sure that it's easy. The easier it is for them to validate, right? I think the better. And so, whatever we can do to kind of make that accessible, with a positive attitude, right?
Providing accurate information helps Pantheon, period. End of story, right?
Yeah.
Like, just accuracy. You got to be accurate. You got to try and be, always get your facts right as much as possible. And, when we do this show and I take notes on a roundtable, I'm literally listening to it, writing down notes verbatim, right?
Yeah.
So I would expect these journalism websites to be doing the same. But the point being here is that might not be what they're doing. So, that's where we come in as the community to provide that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. And while that's, I do feel like this is a little bit self-promoting, right? Because, if you do want really accurate info, like, you're probably going to be looking at us. You're probably going to be looking at Basgrim, like the people that are really like have the context and research a lot. And hopefully people can find us, right? But yeah, this is why we do what we do, so that the right information is out there, and hopefully without spin, right? But I think that's going to be it for this week's community spotlight.
Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. All right, I'm so excited. It's time to start a new tale. I love a good opening, and I was trying to decide what lore tale to do for this segment this week, and I'm also trying to be mindful of remembering which ones we've already done because it's easy to forget. I think we've done all the signature characters, and with that in mind, I thought, we've done the bait before, which involves two of the signature characters, possibly a third one. I thought it was time for another one of those. And the Tales from the Fire is a collection of two short stories. There's part 1 and part 2 that I think we should dive into here. So that's what we're going to be doing this week on the Lore You Know. So the tale of Thalen Greyborn, part 1 is, and we pick up as she is adventuring in an area of rainfall that we haven't seen, but for in this lore bit. So listen along as I start the story of Thalen Greyborn's adventures in Tales from the Fire Part 1, as written by Pantheon's lead writer, Mr. J.N. Gerhardt, on this week's lore segment.
Left foot, step. The spider walks on walls and makes no sound. Right hand, swing. The spider runs on walls and no one sees. Left hand, hold. Right foot, slide. A figure crawls down the face of a mountain cliff without aid of rope. Her silhouette is a scurrying insect beneath the pale light of twin moons. Her clothing is wrapped tightly around her body in a series of knots that weave and coalesce in a protruding mound at her back. Her movements have no sound. Nothing but speed and tension, and blood pushing through her ears. Nothing but sweat gathering down the valley of her spine, and fragments of rock rubbing against the torn calluses of her hands. The grit of skin scraping off her fingers, mixing a mortar of dust and perspiration. She descends through clouds as thin as her breath, a blindfold veiling her eyes. She grips the face of the cliff, moving on from each sharp cleft of rock as quickly as she touches it. She senses the sudden cavity from the night before, where a fragment broke off her hand as she prepared to leap from its secure hold. Time, spider. Faster, spider. She holds her eyes closed behind the blindfold. It bears a simple marking of 3 suns interlocking at the same horizon. The fingers of her hands are bare to better grip the dimples of stone, and a half-glove, made of finely braided cords, coils around her palms. All but her ears are covered in the wrappings of her body. She pauses to listen for clamor below, but her heartbeat is too loud to hear a sound. Time devours the spider, and no one knows it's perished. At last, she finds the choice stone, the one that can bear her weight while she unwraps the cords from her hands. Cords that run down her arms and circle her abdomen in a tight web. This is her silken thread. This is her line of life. This is how the spider runs on walls and no one sees. The choice stone is the anchor, and the cord the tether to her only way home, a return up the cliff wall. She lifts the blindfold, and her jade eyes spy prey, a fractured stone outcropping 5 stories below, the distance severed by a weak cloud that drifts into the cliff's face. With a sudden tug, she runs down the cliff face, parallel to the earth far below. The knot of rope at her back, which took hours to weave, unspools, and in mere moments flies as quickly as her feet can pull it. Run, spider. In the dim light, the thin leather soles of her boots help her sense the unmarked path running along the cliff face. The cord length is precise, delivering her onto the face of the outcropping and loosing her from the web unspun. Thalen Greyborn, a leader of a special band of elven military known as Dythir's Hand, stands atop the jagged, broken boulder. Her eyes roll across the acrid valley below, the stench filtering through the wrappings on her face. To the humans of Thronefast, this place is called the Burning Basin. Yet to our own people of Fairthale, it goes by the name Vios Danad, Deadstorm Valley. Despite abutting to an Arctic strait, Deadstorm Valley is largely barren of organic life. The vast, smoldering expanse could be interchanged with the surface of either Hana or Lotta, the twin moons that hang peacefully in the night sky. Fissures in the crust of the ground release howling, poisonous vapors that rise and fall in an odorous black symphony. It's said that the deeper one treads into the valley, the less of the real world they can recall. The mind of a common mortal will drift into a maze of dreams, deluded into believing a fissure of boiling gas is a long sought-after oasis. The bodies of these broken minds do not linger long upon the corrosive crust. The storms of the valley draw strength from the hot clouds of gas that rise above the surface, which mix with the tides of frigid wind that break in from the coast. For far to the north lies the frostbitten continent of Frozen Nocta, a harsh but striking realm of ice floes and shimmering glaciers. Frozen Nocta sends its storms across the Bethrel Strait and over the shoulders of the Roan Mountains and into the Deadstorm Valley. There, the hot spray of fissures mingles with the north-born winds, and from their union come the dead storms, tumultuous bursts of violent toxicity that roam the valley floor with uncanny awareness to mortal presence. Whole armies have been ripped apart by these vortex titans, most notably a unified human and elven force in the year 503 IH. Countless souls, believing in vain that mere chance had brought about the collision of natural and mortal forces, while the few survivors are left to meet the children of the storms. Yet tonight, Thalen saw no cyclones raging across the expanse. There was no bitter gale from Frozen Nocta, no cover of cloud as thick as the stone doors of the deep. There was nothing but emptiness for the spider to spy upon. Thalen looked over the valley once more and saw nothing that moved. She gritted her teeth and glared at the moons, ungrateful for their soft light. She wanted the beams of Hata and Lana kept far away, hidden behind the layers of clouds. She needed no tranquil cover for her descent into the dead storm, for she came not to observe this broken landscape. She came to hunt upon it.
And that is the lore you know. So, episode 109 is in the books, and Desrin, I hope you enjoyed yourself this week. What are we doing? Like we said, it was going to be a short episode. It's an hour and 10 minutes.
Well, like I said, we're always going to be able to find something to talk about, right?
Yeah, we don't have a problem with this. I'm always like, it's funny, even after 109 episodes, I still get like nervous or anxiety because I'm like, oh, we have nothing to talk about, nothing interesting to say, and people aren't going to like what we have to say, and it's just going to be boring. But here we are. We still managed to fill an hour and 10 minutes or so with just, you know, because we just enjoy talking about this stuff so much. So hopefully it was enjoyable for all you.
Yeah, and if you're still here, thanks for sticking around. I mean,
yeah, and good luck and congratulations to whoever won the Watchers Pledge. So again, connect with me if we haven't before. Again, I'm on Discord. It's Theric, number 2057 on Discord is my ID, and Theric@Pantheon.plus is my email address. So we'll get you that pledge. But thanks everybody for hanging out today. Hope to see you next week. And thanks for hanging out.
Bye all.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric @PantheonTheric on Twitter, and Desrin @DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.